Welcome to the Lou Blakely Show. You're in the right place if you're a service provider who is ready to transition into a more freedom-based business model with digital products. In this podcast, I share with you a unique combination of launch strategy, energetics, and mindset to create true, long-lasting success. It's time to ditch the burnout for good, create the business that you truly want, and share it with the world. Let's get started. Hi and welcome to the Lou Blakely Show. You're listening to episode 17. In this episode, I'm going to be chatting to you all about launch energy. So bringing the energy in your launch is vital. And if you've listened to any of my other podcasts, you'll know that it's one of the 3 keys to launching, which is strategy, mindset, and energetics. So I haven't done an episode specifically on launch energy or energetics yet, so I'm excited for this one. And when I sat down and mapped out this episode, there is so much to talk about when it comes to this, and it's such an important topic because it really can have such a big impact on your launch, but also how you feel about your launch, right? So I will be sharing with you how you can bring more energy to your launches and then keep your energy high during your launch. And in this episode, I'm referring specifically to the period of time in your launch that the doors to your product are actually open. So there's different phases of a launch, but I'm talking about the open cart period, okay? Because this is when the energy that you bring is most important. It becomes super important. And this is when I see launches flop or flourish, and it's always a reflection of the person's energy. So this is a must listen if you're about to launch or you're thinking about doing a launch. Launch energy is just so important because if it's off, it can derail a launch very quickly. I've seen situations where everything is in place, but the minute the doors open, energetically the person just kind of checks out and leaves the room. And it really has a big effect and impact on the results that you can expect. You just can't launch and then energetically tune out because it feels too hard or you don't want to get visible, that kind of thing. It can result in very low level of signups because the person running the launch has just kind of opted out right at the start. And if you, as the person running the launch, opt out, then of course people aren't going to opt in and sign up. You're the one who really needs to set the energy for people to actually want to be part of that. So I've also seen people lose interest halfway through a launch, maybe if the launch isn't going as they planned. Sometimes there can be a few quiet days in a launch, which is actually really normal, but some people can take that as something's wrong, so I'm just going to give up while I'm ahead kind of thing. And that's not good either because really you're just losing so much opportunity by doing that. And I have to say, we've all wanted to check out a launch at some point. I'm not saying that it's not a normal thing, but if you've gone to all the effort to run a launch, you've just got to really focus on keeping your energy up right to the very end and even past then. Okay, so learning how to manage your energy so it doesn't happen is actually really, really important. And that's why I feel like today's episode is a really important one. In fact, I think this isn't a topic that's spoken about a lot. Everyone can create a strategy, whether it's aligned for you or not is another question. But, there's so much information on creating strategies and actioning them, but quite often the action part doesn't get done and that actually all comes back to energetics. So if you've ever done a launch and you kind of checked out halfway through, then definitely listen in. If you've got a launch coming up, then definitely listen in. Because the reality is, if your launch energy is on, it's going to allow you to show up fully in your launch and with more care for your potential customers. So you're going to feel like it's less about you and less from that victim mentality of people aren't signing out, what's wrong with me kind of thing, and actually have more care for your potential customers and show up and really give them a great experience, but also really tap into what they're feeling and be able to serve them at a really high level that's actually going to impact your results hugely. It's going to create a more enjoyable experience for people who are paying attention to your launch and who are actually on the fence. And, all of this stuff is going to give you much better results because people are magnetized by your energy. Like, it actually pulls people towards you if you have a great energy around your launch. So there are things that you can do to set up the right environment for right energy. It just doesn't happen. Okay, so if we go into a launch and we don't even think about the energy side of things, which is really normal actually, but not ideal, because you actually need to plan for how you're going to manage your energy. So your strategy is definitely going to be part of that. So if you haven't already, I definitely recommend that you go and listen to episode 16 after this one, which is all about how to create an aligned launch strategy and having that strategy actually be in alignment for you with how you like to work, your personality, all that kind of stuff. Then the energy is going to stack on top of that. Like, it's going to be easier to hold a higher energy. So go and listen to that after this one because I think you'll really enjoy it. But in this episode, I'm actually sharing with you ways to bring the energy within your actual launch. So here we go. Here are 9 ways. Yes, 9. And honestly, I could have added more. There is so many ways that you can work on your energy throughout your launch. But yeah, today I'm covering 9, and definitely stay tuned for the last one because that is the most common one and the one that I see trip people up the most. And yeah, we want to avoid that. So listen in. So the first one, make sure that you've done all your launch prep in advance. Now, people can really rebel against this one, and I have done this in the past because we feel like I'm not the kind of person who does things in advance. I'm more of a last minute type of person, and that's all well and good. But I'd really encourage you with launching that quite often, regardless of your personality. It actually, if you do leave things to the last minute, it's going to be at a detriment to yourself and the energy that you can show up in. So it's really important because everything else that I'm going to share with you in this episode really depends on this stuff being sorted. So I'm talking about your masterclass, like having that done, prepared in advance, or your challenge content, whatever kind of launch you're doing. Your sales page, definitely you want to have that done well in advance. Your checkout page, and a big one that I see that often gets kind of relegated to after the launch is over is your follow-up emails. So I would say what I've just listed there are the big things, the big moving pieces that go into a launch. And you may notice that I haven't mentioned social media here, but I definitely recommend having a base of those created in advance too, but it's like not as important. So it's easy to think, like I said, it's a kind of like I fly by the seat of my pants kind of person. And I like to create on the fly. And sure, that approach may work for you in other areas. And, I've done this too because I'm like that too. So, but let me tell you, when it comes to launching and bringing the energy, it's not great. I have personally seen far too many people think they'll just write emails in real time. And as I said, I've done this too. And the result has been a bunch of emails that are sent out over that open cart period that actually really lack structure and strategy, and they don't hit the different pieces of information that need to be sent out at certain parts of the open door period. And the emails that you do send can quite often, repeat themselves and are often actually sent out too late because we didn't start them early enough. They can also be sometimes on a tangent based on our mood that day. Not good. So not only do you risk not having a great strategy and you're reacting instead of strategically providing the right info at the right time, but you'll always feel like you're on the back foot and racing to catch up. This in itself is not good for your energy. Okay, so I highly recommend getting everything done in advance. It really helps with the other tips that I'm going to share with you. So the second one is to allow space for creativity. So in order to show up online while the doors are open with a high energy level, you need to allow time for creativity. So I'm talking more specifically about social media here. So you've done like the big needle movers, which is your sales page, your emails, that kind of thing. So they should be done in advance. And that is going to free up your time to have the energy to show up creatively. It's going to allow you to get visible and show up on social media a whole lot more. It's going to mean that you can go live. You can kind of come up with ad hoc stuff throughout your launch that is in response to people's questions, or maybe you're noticing that some people keep asking you or like saying, I can't sign up because of this or that. They're showing you what their beliefs are around why they can't sign up, and you actually have time to create content as a reaction to that can help them overcome those beliefs. But you're only going to have that freedom and space to do that if you've created that space. Okay, so you can also, if you've created this time or crafted this time into your launch, then you can really show up for your potential customers and make it more about them than yourself because you've got the space. Okay, so tip 3 is scheduling downtime during your launch. This one is so important. So just know that there will be times where you just need to get away from your launch. Sometimes we have a 5-day, a 7-day open cart period. It really depends on your strategy. And at some points, you're just going to want to escape from it, and that it's actually completely normal. So make sure you've got space to go out for a walk, get some fresh air. Don't stop your normal activities like working out, meditation, eating lunch slowly, maybe outside and all that stuff. Don't remove all of that because you're launching in, there's a lot of talk about launch hustle. That's outdated. You don't need to hustle in your launch if you have done those big things previously in advance. You really need to create space to look after yourself. And energy doesn't come from nowhere. We actually need to reset, and then our energy comes from rest. So make sure that you have time for completely doing nothing as well and switching off. So something that sidetracks you and gets you off your phone completely and away from launch land can be quite good. So for example, you can make sure that you're watching a really good show on Netflix at nighttime that you can just fully escape into and leave the all-consuming world of launching behind for a few hours. And that's really going to help reset your nervous system and help you come from a relaxed state rather than an overloaded state where you get into a state of fight or flight and the good energy gets lost because you're just in hustle mode the whole time. So make sure that you've got time for that. So you'll notice all of these things so far are all about managing your time and allowing yourself to have the time you need rather than always on the back foot. Now, the 4th one is don't let their stories become your stories. So sometimes in a launch, we can get feedback that our price is too high, we didn't give enough info in our free launch events. So it's quite common to sometimes receive little comments here and there. And it's very easy to start believing these things and feel like people are disappointed in us or they expected more. But really, they are just limiting beliefs coming up for the person saying them, and they're expressing them to you. And we can choose whether we want to take them on or not. So that's kind of what I mean about don't let their stories become your stories. Sometimes during a launch, we might get a few comments and then all of a sudden we think that we have to change stuff for that person. But just understand that that is from that person's filter of the world. It is their belief system coming up to play, and just because they're saying it does not mean it's true. So an example of that, could be maybe they say you should be giving this for free or something like that, which is actually something that I see quite a lot in the life coaching niche. But that person's saying that, maybe they don't ever invest in themselves because deep down they feel like they're not good enough. So they were hoping it would be free or cheaper than what it is. And because of that belief, they were disappointed that you didn't give away your best material for free in your launch event because they thought that you should have because they wanted it for free. Again, this is from the same belief of not being good enough. And the thing is, they're not willing to invest in themselves. And as a result, they don't think you should value yourself just because they don't value themselves. So at the end of the day, these are all beliefs. You can see how that same belief shows up in multiple different ways and may make them comment on things that is really just a reflection of their internal world rather than the truth. our truth. So we can choose to move on when we get these comments without letting them mean anything to us or affect us. So some people are just our perfect customers who really value what we offer. And then there's some people out there who just aren't. And on that, don't ever project if someone can or cannot afford your offer. So always be open to any possibilities. I have helped people with launches when, my client has said to me, that person, they're not going to sign up because they just can't afford it. And then next thing they'll sign up. So we just can never project what other people can or cannot afford. So we don't need to make those assumptions. And also just realize that if you do get any comments, it's quite common in a masterclass for people to write little comments. Sometimes once people start selling, you really shouldn't be reading those comments. Like, get a VA to be filtering through for good questions and that kind of thing. But they're not about you. They're about them. They're about the person saying them. So don't let that stuff sidetrack you at all. So the next tip is to allow time for self-care. So another time management one, but super, super important. So launches can feel like a lot if we choose to let them be a lot. So instead of clearing your calendar and making every second available to your launch, stop. Launches are not meant to be hustle mode every step of the way. Instead, make sure you have your self-care rituals scheduled in just as you would any other time. The big difference is during launch, you are going to need this kind of self-care more than normal. So what that looks like for you depends on what you love. For me, I love to meditate in front of my red light. I've got one of those red light therapy devices, and meditating for me in front of that is just next level relaxation. I also like to have Epsom salt baths, and I do yoga nidra to get to sleep. I also go to the sauna and I go for walks, get some fresh air. Those are my kind of main go-tos when it comes to self-care. And I always actually underestimate how restorative they are, but they make such a big difference. So what are your things? And actually make sure you're using those tools, that you have those self-care tools every single day of your launch. It's going to have a very positive impact on your nervous system, which is an absolute game changer when it comes to anything in business, but especially launching, where we can sometimes go into that fight or flight without realizing. So make sure you still have time for this and choose what feels good for you. And if you don't have self-care rituals at all, then definitely get on that outside of your launch as well. So the next tip is to embrace the discomfort. So there's no denying it. Some parts of your launch may feel uncomfortable as you're not sure what's happening next. You're really kind of in the unknown. You might experience a couple of quiet days mid-launch. You may not get sign-ups as fast as you thought, or you're waiting for the doors to close to see how many people join, and you just really don't know if anyone else is going to join, if you're going to have last-minute sign-ups, that kind of thing. So instead of resisting and running away from these weird feelings, just realize they're a part of launching, and actually it's a very similar feeling to excitement. So the body doesn't know the difference between excitement and fear. So reframe it as excitement and embrace it all. It's all part of the experience, and don't let the what if stop you from launching. Every launch is an experience, and you'll take away so much from it. Which brings me on to the next tip, which is view your launch like an experiment. And this is true whether you're going into your first launch or you're a seasoned launcher. Okay, so each launch you do is likely going to have new things added to it, and sometimes these things will work like crazy, or they don't work like you thought they would, and you really have to be okay with that. So go into your launch with the goal to learn as much as you can, to test and experiment and see what works and what feels good for you. One of my very first coaches calls this childlike curiosity, and it's such a great way to look at the world or any experience that we're putting ourselves into, whether it be a desirable one or something we're not so happy about. This means that we're looking at it from the lens of, I'm going to treat this like a journey, like an experience, and I'm going to look at it with curiosity at every turn. And also, if you find yourself saying the words like, I hate launching, I don't want to launch, then we really need to work on reframing that, because you can't say I hate launching and then show up to launch and expect results, right? So we need to work on that. I love to launch. This is a great opportunity, and see what happens from that reframe. So it could actually be about going to shut off for a bit and have some self-care and, resetting your nervous system. But it could also be your launch strategy, not your product, that's not in alignment, that you don't feel good about. Like maybe there's certain things that you're doing that really don't sit right with you. So really figure out what's not feeling great, identify it, and then make some changes for your next launch. Like I said, it's all an experiment. We don't need to put so much pressure on it. So the next tip is, and this is the final one and the biggest one, and I have to say this is the thing that will derail your launch if you don't work on this, and that is to drop the conditions around your launch. Look, we've all done this. We've set big goals and then totally strangled the energy out of a launch by putting conditions on its performance. For example, you might be thinking, this launch has to hit my goals, otherwise my husband is going to ask me to get a job. Or if I don't get more than 60 new students, it's worse than my last launch, so I should just give up. No one wants my product anymore. That kind of thing. Yes, I have heard many of these excuses or conditions. But what I want to encourage you to do is stop putting so much pressure on your launches. You're literally squeezing the life out of them. They are living, breathing things, and if you're placing all of these conditions around them, you're actually squeezing all of the energy out of them too. So while it's all good setting goals and striving to achieve them, coming into your open cut period is not the time to really dwell on the pressure and the what ifs. Instead, you can focus on getting into a higher vibration, bringing the energy, and really focusing in on your potential students and their needs. This is going to have a much bigger impact than you sitting there putting all of that pressure on yourself that this must perform or else. That's not a nice place to be. So what can happen here is that people just check out completely from the launch. And if you haven't done things in advance and you don't have self-care time scheduled in already, or, time allowed for that in your day, then this is going to be so much harder to deal with because you don't have the space to really work on, how you're going to flip it from putting the pressure on the launch to actually enjoying the process. And it really is a shift in your mindset to kind of change this whole situation if you are putting conditions on your launch. I feel like everyone has done this. So if you feel like you've put too much pressure on a launch and then maybe you haven't launched again since because it was too much, then maybe you could actually do another launch and approach it from that childlike curiosity and view it as an experiment and just see what happens to your energy. Like that is when we really get into the magnetic style of visibility where people just want to know or be in our energy because we are showing up from this really grounded, solid place. And that is so important with launching. So I hoped that you enjoyed this episode on how to keep your energy high during a launch. It is so, so, so important. And, I think this is just as big as strategy, to be honest, but your energy can kind of ride the wave of having a really solid strategy that is in alignment for you. And I definitely encourage you to go and listen to episode 16, which is all about creating an aligned launch strategy as well. So I hope you enjoyed this episode today. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time. Thanks, course creators and go-getters. You're incredible, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit subscribe in your podcast app so you don't miss an episode. If you'd like to find out more about what I offer, head across to loublakely.com. See you next time.